Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's shatter some paradigms. The paradigm I want to shatter today concerns communication. Communication, you say, why? What's so important about that? I'm talking about the sort of communication we want to start to develop as we address racial issues. You may or may not have seen some of my other videos where I discuss collaborative conversation as a better way of dealing with racial issues. Now, those videos are more in theory. What I did not do in those videos is go into the nuts and bolts of what it means to do collaborative conversation. That's what I want to do in this video. This may be a video you could send out to members of your church, to other individuals, and just, hey, here's some tips on how to do a better job of collaborative conversation. Just a reminder, collaborative conversation are conversations where we build on each other's ideas to find solutions. They're goal-oriented conversations. So we do them with a purpose, with a goal, in order to build on each other's ideas. How do we do that? You see, my fear is, in our country, we've not done a good job of teaching how to have collaborative conversations. We jump into debate, we jump into fight, rather than trying to find out the ideas of others, build on them, and find better solutions. So this is somewhat of a practical video. I'm not trying to make big arguments on what we should do, but if you're convinced that we need better conversations, and this is the way to better conversations, then I hope to give you some clues on how to do that. I divide this advice into two sections: active listening and effective communication. Because conversations need both. You need people who can listen well, you need people who can communicate well. If you don't have both of those, or either one of those, then things tend to bog down. So first, let's talk about active listening. What do I mean by active listening? As a scholar who does quantitative but also qualitative research, I engage in interviews. And these interviews are what I do to gather certain types of data, how people think about things. And when I'm doing this as a researcher, and this is important on active listening, I'm not trying to argue people to a point of view. I did research on atheists. I clearly am not an atheist. My purpose was to understand atheists. And so I engage in techniques that maximize my chances of understanding those atheists. That's called active listening. So let's talk about some tips of active listening. First thing, ask open-ended questions. You want to avoid yes-no questions unless there's a set up an open-ended question. So if you're in a conversation on racial issues, you don't want to ask someone, is this racist or not? You may want to ask someone, why do you think this is racist or not? You don't want to ask someone, why, do you think this is not racist? As someone who claims there's not any racist, you don't want to ask them, this is not racist. You want to ask them, why do you think it's not racist? You see, those sort of questions open up the conversation. A yes-no question can kind of say, well, yes or no, and then it kind of stops. You want to keep the conversation going with open-ended questions. Another point, ask for illustrations. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I tell you, an illustration is worth 1,000 pictures. Ask for illustrations so that you can know more of what people are saying. People reveal a lot in their illustrations. They reveal their emotions, they reveal what's their priorities. You can pick out a lot. Can you overpick out? Can you be overly trying to get all the minutiae? Yes, that's possible. But a lot of times, illustrations tell us a lot about what we want to know. I would also advise to stay off what we call rabbit trails. If the conversations take you way this way or way that way, but it's not on the topic you want to talk about, try to stay away from that. That's not very helpful. Now, here's a very key one. learn how to paraphrase. When I was talking with these atheists, I would not ask them, is religion good or bad? Because that's closing any questions. I would ask them open-ended question. Why do you think religion is bad? I would listen to them. And then I would try to put in my own words what they had just said. You see, if I can put in my own words what they just said, then I'm illustrating that I understand their perspective. Not necessarily that I agree with their perspective, but I understand their perspective. This is the value of paraphrasing. Learn how to paraphrase what people have said. And if they say, no, you got it wrong, that's information too, right? How did I get it wrong? How can I get it correct the next time? Learn how to paraphrase. I also would say, when it comes to active listening, we need empathy. We need to have feelings for what the person is going through, for why they perceive what they perceive. We don't have to agree with them, once again. But sometimes when you have empathy, when you may not agree with why they have this emotion, but you probably can relate to the emotion itself. And connecting with them will help open them up. And we want to listen in ways where people feel comfortable talking to us in an honest manner. When I did research with atheists, I was not trying to convert them to Christianity, although that would have been lovely, but that's not my aim whatsoever. My aim was to understand them. And the best way I can do that is to open them up. This is active listening. In some ways, this may be harder than the other part, which is also very important. So we got to get the active listening down. But then there's effective communication. Now, if people feel threatened by what you are saying, they cannot hear you. They just hear the threat. So learning how to communicate in an effective manner, that's gold. So we need to learn how can we talk to people in ways that they can hear us, rather than talk to them in ways that make them more defensive. How do we do this? Look at our body language. If your body language, when you're communicating, is you're showing you're really not that interested, and you're not focused on them, that's not going to be very effective. Your body language should be that you're engaged in them. You're communicating with them. You're engaged, forward, looking at them. Body language is important. To that end, it's also to look at the body language of the person you're talking to. Most professors will tell you that we're reading our students' body language all the time when we're lecturing. Because we got to know, hey, is this a time where I'm starting to lose them? Do I need to throw a joke in there to sort of get their attention back? Do I need to put an illustration in there? Is this too technical? Do I need to break it down more? I get that by looking at their body language. Likewise, pay attention to the body language of the person listening to you. Sometimes people don't want to say, I don't get it, but their face tells you they don't get it. And that's okay. Sometimes what you're trying to tell them is hard for them to hear or difficult for them to understand. Look at their body language. Understand where they are coming from. Next, avoid using insider language. Now here's what I mean by this. We all come from different cultures and subcultures. And those cultures and subcultures build a certain type of language that we have that other people in our culture understand. And that's okay. That's okay. But then when you talk to someone from a different culture, cross-culturally, different race, the way I'm talking to you all about topics is different than if I was talking to other sociologists. And that's not a knock on you. It's just that we have an insider language that makes it easier to transmit certain types of information that would not be very useful now. Think about, am I using language that's neutral, or maybe even language in their own culture that make it easier for them to understand me? Here's another very important point. Use what you've learned in order to communicate. Let me give you a really good example of this. Years ago, I used to speak often to predominantly white groups who are conservative Christians. And from listening to them, I knew a few things. First, they were not overtly racist. Even though this was 15, 20 years ago, these were not people who were overtly racist. They would deny the importance of race, which is the second point. They thought that things were pretty good, and they tended to deny institutional racism. Now, I have a video on colorblindness, which they tended to be, and why it's problematic, but that's who they were. Third point is they cared deeply about their families. Now, why do I tell you all this? I learned that early on, I talked about research that I had done that illustrated that among white Christians, the race of who they wanted to date was more important than the religion of who they wanted to date. And when I said that, lights went off. You could see it. Once again, I'm paying attention to their body language. Lights went off. And they were like, I don't want my son or daughter dating a white atheist or a black Christian. What's wrong with this? I had their attention, and they were more willing to listen to what I had to say. I used what I learned from listening ahead of time in order to communicate. Communicate to people in ways they can hear you, not in ways that you want to hear them. And I know some people will say, well, I shouldn't have to change the way my communication style. They should understand me. No, we don't do that to people we care about. And if Christians, we care about people from other cultures. We don't do that to people. You don't do that to your spouse or your kids. You find ways to connect with them. And that's what we need to do here. I would also say be kind. It is good to be kind when you're talking. Sometimes it feels like people can talk and they say, all right, I got you. You can't go away. I have your attention. So I can say anything I want, and you have to accept it. And that's the path towards people not hearing you out. I'm not saying be dishonest. Be honest in how you see things, how you feel about things, but do it in a kind manner. This is not tone policing. This is effective communication. Use illustrations. Yes, use illustrations. You may have noticed that I've used illustrations in this talk. Illustrations, once again, are worth 1,000 pictures. So if you can think of a good illustration to make a point, use that. It could be a parable. It could be a story from your life. It could be a variety of things. Use illustrations in order to create clarity. And finally, take your time. This is a difficult thing that you're trying to do. It's not easy. And I understand that. Sometimes you get to a place you go, oh, I'm not going anywhere. Go back, start again, and hopefully you have someone who's patient with you and you're patient with them, because communication is sometimes difficult and it takes patience, and we can find solutions. I hope these tips help you. Now you may be saying, okay, when do I use them? Do I wait for another racial problem? I would say you could use them right away. You know someone you disagree with on racial issues, or maybe a different issue if you want to do it that way. Invite them to lunch, to coffee, to Coke. And say, look, I know we disagree on this. I just want to hear your perspective. I don't want to argue with you. Let me know your perspective on this. And then hear them out. Paraphrase. See if you understand them. Develop the tools you'll need, because when that racial incident happens, and it will happen, then you get the tools to engage with people you disagree with, know where they're coming from, and then you're in the position to try to problem solve with them. Is that not what we want? Does this shatter any paradigms? Paradigms of a communication that's a better way than just arguing at people, than just disagreeing with them? If it does, then I hope you take this under consideration. I hope you think about this as a way in which we can deal with racial issues that's more productive, healthy, and move our conversation forward and lessen the racial alienation in our society. If you enjoy content like this, I hope you consider subscribing. I hope you will like it. If you don't like what I've had to say, give me a comment. If you like it, give me a comment. I'm looking to grow this channel, and I hope in part to have better conversations and to look at issues in a Christ-like way on how we Christians don't have to fall into the left or the right or argue, oh, you got to be anti-racist or you got to be colorblind, but how can we find solutions in a godly manner? And that's my heart, and I hope it's your heart as well. Well, thanks for coming with me this far. I hope you come back where we can shatter some more paradigms.